Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up. Our guest today isn't your average bean counter. Get ready for a financial force of nature. We have the one and only Charles Reed joining us on the Inappropriate Growth podcast. Charles is a financial samurai with over 50 years experience slaying financial dragons across all industries. He's not just a CPA, he's a freaking CPA ninja, having passed that ridiculously tough U.S. tax court non-attorney practitioner's examination. That's right. This guy can fight the IRS in court. Need I say more? Charles is more than just numbers. He's a decorated Marine, a sergeant, and a combat veteran who understands the meaning of grit and leadership. He's a teacher, a consultant, a CEO, a CFO, a COO, basically a one-man wrecking crew with a strategic roadmap for success tattooed on his brain. So if you're looking to break the rules and achieve some seriously inappropriate growth, you've come to the right place. Let's get this party started.
Welcome to Inappropriate Growth, the podcast where we get real about the grind behind the glory. I'm Paul, your host, and I'm here to take you on a journey through the untold stories of business triumphs. We might raise some eyebrows, but it's all about the hustle and we don't fit the mold. Here we're talking about the kind of effort that doesn't just push the envelope, it shreds it to pieces. We're building a community where the norm is to defy norms. So buckle up, because we're diving deep into the beginnings that were anything but humble. The times when giving up seemed like the only option. We'll also dig into all of those wild, insane, and out-of-the-box strategies that led to massive growth. From growth hacks to best practices, this podcast will be fast, furious, and should be a whole lot of fun. Join us as we redefine what it means to grow and turn business growth into an art form. Welcome to Inappropriate Growth.
Welcome to Season 2, Episode 2 of the Inappropriate Growth Podcast. I have with us Mr. Charles Reed from Get Payroll. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm a Midwestern boy. I grew up in Iowa. I graduated from high school at 16. Worked for a while, didn't know what I wanted to do, wasn't ready for college. Joined the United States Marine Corps, spent 4 years in service, 2 years overseas, including a combat tour in Vietnam. Came back, was stationed in Kansas City, met and married my wife, Ruth. She was 10 years older than I was and had 5 children when I married her. I claim insanity, but it worked. We were married for 45 years before she passed. When I got out of service, I found business did not appreciate what military experience brought to the table then, as now, because if they haven't been there, they don't understand. So I went to college, got my BBA, my MBA, sat for and passed my CPA exam while I was still in graduate school. Went to work for Texas Instruments. Spent 15 years in the corporate world, large companies, small companies, startups, turnarounds. Wonderful experience. Learned an immense amount. All the things they don't teach you in college. So I had a good time with that, but realized I was never going to get to the top because I didn't have the political skills. Unwilling to stab people in the back and toss them off the ladder. I hate playing politics. So if I was going to run a business, and I grew up in a family business, I was going to have to start my own. So a third of a century ago, Ruth and I started our own business and have been growing it ever since. It was an accounting practice with a payroll sideline to start with. I sold off the accounting practice to my partner a dozen years or so ago and kept the payroll and have continued to grow that. We provide payroll and payroll-related services to small and medium-sized businesses around the country. We're a national scope firm. So that's kind of where we got to.
Well, you mentioned the skills that you've acquired in the military. You took a fascinating path from serving in Vietnam all the way leading expert in payroll. But what experience would you say, if any, from your military service translated into your business success?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I was trained as a computer programmer and systems engineer while in service, and that stead me in good stead for many years because I'm able to deal with data processing people and computers and so on in a way that a lot of my peers at my age were not able to and were very late into the field. But beyond that, the military teaches leadership. In the Marine Corps, one of the tenets is mission, men, self. You accomplish the mission at whatever it takes. That's the primary purpose, is to accomplish the mission. Then you take care of your men, and only then do you take care of yourself. And that translates very well into business. Our mission is to provide a perfect payroll on a timely basis every time to our clients. And we do whatever it takes to do that and accomplish that mission. Then I take care of my people. I make sure my people are well paid, they're given the tools they need, they're not given responsibility without authority, all the things that are necessary to make a business run effectively. We I realize that without my staff, we would not succeed. Pure and simple. I can't do it all myself. We're way too big for that. So my staff is critical to me. And only after my staff is taken care of do I worry about myself and my income and taking care of what I need. And that works out very well. It's good leadership. So that's Marine Corps training. I was an NCO, a non-commissioned officer in the Marine Corps, and that's been very valuable to me. Now, there were some things I learned in the military that didn't translate well. The military is very hierarchical. Everybody, either you jump for them or they jump for you, and that doesn't translate well to business. So I had to unlearn that. That's where my wife came in. She
Especially
was
now.
a real people person. I'm much more, yeah, especially now, even more so now. I'm much more of an analytical person, so she broke me of some of those habits. And being married kind of breaks you of that too.
Oh yeah, my kids would complain about my dad jokes, and I was like, I used to be hilarious until I met mom. I was just there's certain things I wasn't allowed to talk about anymore. They were hilarious.
I've got five, so yeah, I understand. But they grow up and they start telling the same jokes to their kids. So
It's a healthy cycle, I'm sure. But Get Payroll's been around since 1991. Can you walk us through the early days of building that business and what were some of the biggest challenges you faced getting started? Like what things almost derailed the whole thing that you had to overcome?
me, I had to learn to manage a business. I had to learn to work on my business, not in my business. As most entrepreneurs, we find ourselves a
Right.
job. We call it a company, but it's a job. And we work in that, and hopefully we're successful because we started that because we think we can do something faster, better, cheaper than the competition and get clients. And in a lot of cases, we're right. In a lot of cases, we're wrong. But that doesn't translate to building a business. I'd been in business for a few years, had a few people working for me, was very frustrated. And a friend of mine, I was at a payroll conference, at a payroll conference, and gave me a book, Michael Gerber's The E Myth Revisited, which is a primer on working on your business.
One of my favorite
Not
books.
I buy it by the dozen and give it to clients. It's required reading for every employee. Uh, every one of my staff members gets a copy and is required to read it when I hire them. And it teaches you how to work on your business, not in your business. And that, because I was ready to fire everybody and just move it back into the game room, be a sole entrepreneur, a sole proprietor, a CPA. Um, but that gave me the tools and the knowledge to start working on my business and growing my business. And that's made all the difference in the world. That was critical.
I love that book. I love the stories, the pies and the making of the pies. It's a great book. It made everything clear and easy to understand. Yes, you're a technician. If you're not an entrepreneur, you might need to go some people read that book and go back to work. They stop being an entrepreneur, and it's good because they saved them a whole lot of money and time.
Absolutely. It's being an entrepreneur is not for everybody. Frankly, there's people that should work for the government.
Having that chromosome or that skill set or that aptitude to be an entrepreneur isn't necessarily a good thing. Because I know some people who are born entrepreneurs and they are living a depressed, miserable life because they're stuck in some sort of corporate situation and they're miserable. But I know some people that thrive there and they try to start businesses, and it's humbling. If you're not a born entrepreneur, it's possible you can become one. It's not impossible, but you've got to be all in. And I talk to business owners. I do business coaching, and when someone is just entering into sole proprietorship or just entering the business world, I want to find out why, because in most cases they're leaving a 40-hour job that pays pretty well and pretty regularly to an 80-hour job that might not pay at all. The only thing I can guarantee is it's probably going to pay a lot less than what the job. You still want to do it, then maybe we can work together. But if you don't want to do it under those conditions, maybe you're not an entrepreneur, and it's going to be too much work to become one.
And another thing, and I got to ask this in a panel discussion here a couple of years ago. One of the members of the audience asked me, "What about work-life balance for an entrepreneur?" And I just cracked up. I started laughing. I said, for a beginning entrepreneur, there is no work-life balance. It's work all day, every day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And if you don't have a partner who understands that, you're going to have personal problems as well. There's just, for a beginning entrepreneur, it's only work. So if you can't handle that, don't plan on being an entrepreneur.
I've talked to a lot of successful business owners, and a lot of them say the business destroyed the relationship they were in when they started it. It was only after they had found their legs in their business and started to realize they could take their head out of the sand and look beyond the business were they able to find a second spouse. Even if you can do it, is it worth the relationship? You have to weigh all those outcomes, I guess.
I was lucky in that my wife and I went into the business together.
So
I had grown up in a family business and my parents worked together. So I thought working with your spouse was normal. Well, working with your spouse is an unnatural act, I promise you. Uh, and you've got to revamp your relationship because what you do at home doesn't work at the office. So we had to separate our lives into two separate things of our home life and our work life. And we had different roles in those relationships. And it took a couple of years for us to tie those things down.
I know people who go to work to get away from home,
That's too
and
bad.
they go home to get away from work. Well, you can't get away from anything if home is work and work is home. The concept of bootstrap versus funded. Did you bootstrap the company, or did you seek outside funding? And how did you approach, I guess, financing the company's growth?
Basically funded the business from my pocketbook. We did have some equipment. We were a mobile accounting service to start with, so I had some loans for some vans to make that work. But it was it generated revenue to start with, so it wasn't a big deal. I'd been in corporate world for years, and had some wherewithal to be able to do that. So I didn't take out huge debt or anything like that to get started, and we were positive cash flow within the first year, so it worked out very nicely. We were lucky.
Did you ever have to go back to the well and get any sort of
Well,
financing
we've
for
continued
growth?
to just do it internally. We've borrowed money from time to time. We built our own building. We've paid it off. We've had lines of credit from time to time. They used to be easier to get than they are now. Trying to get a line of credit from a bank now, uh, you've got to basically deliver your firstborn. I remember Earl Nye was ran a big bank here in Dallas. saying that though they still make money, they still make loans to characters, they don't make character loans. And he thought that was a real shame, because obviously character is the only thing that guarantees repayment of a loan. But the bean counters have gotten a hold of the banks, and it's no longer credit decisions by um, character, it's credit decisions by credit score.
If we're talking about clients, what would you say are some of the most common payroll mistakes that small businesses make, and how can they avoid these costly errors?
There's two big areas. The first is classification. This is a mistake that entrepreneurs make, is whether people are that are working for you are employees, and if so, whether they're hourly or salary, or are they independent contractors. None of that's a choice. There's a whole body of law that determines all that. Now, you can structure some relationships to influence it, but it's not something you can just say, okay, I'm just gonna pay you a check and you're an independent contractor. If they are, that's fine. If they are not legally an independent contractor, that's called tax fraud, and you're all going to get into trouble, and you will be looking at substantial penalties and interest, and you will get audited. Your state unemployment department will audit you for that. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And of course, if you have a number of employees that you're paying that way, it just takes one ex-employee to go down and file for unemployment. And when they don't find any records, he says, yeah, but I was an employee, then the auditor will be out within a couple of weeks to check all your records and so on. The next biggest problem beginning companies make is they don't know what they don't know. You have to know what numbers you need to get assigned by what regulatory bodies, what reports you have to file, when you have to file them, what monies you have to deposit, and when you have to deposit those. Any mistake in that is expensive. There'll be penalties and interest if you don't file the report, if you don't file it on time, if you don't make the deposit, if you don't make it on time. All those are employment tax penalties, and the IRS in the states issue billions and billions and billions of dollars of those every year.
I talk to a lot of people that do that. I'm just thinking, is not only is this necessarily the highest best use of your time, but also, are you sure you're doing it right? Because in relatively speaking, it's pretty inexpensive to have it done by a payroll company versus, especially a lawyer who could maybe bill at $600 an hour to spend time maybe doing it 80% right.
Exactly. The first rule of time management is only do what only you can do. So an entrepreneur, a business owner needs to focus on their business and running their business, not on peripheral things that have to be done, of course. But I don't sew my own clothes. I don't build my own cars. I don't mow my own lawn. I don't raise my own beef cattle. I don't do a lot of things. I outsource that to people who do it for a living and are very, very good at it. Well, payroll is one of those things that's simple to outsource. It's a pittance to pay for. And the expertise that you get, uh, you can't hire somebody like me for anything less than well into six figures. I'm sorry, we're just not available. CPA, tax court practitioner, 50 years experience, been on the IRS Advisory Council, U.S. tax court practitioner. You can't hire me. But when you pay for payroll, I get thrown in for free. So it's a hell of a deal. Now, you say, well, I won't have any problems. And maybe you're right. Maybe you'll never have a problem with the IRS, but 40% of small businesses do every year. So if you didn't get a penalty last year or the year before, you're due this year. You will probably get one. It may be valid, it may not be. And if it's not valid, how do you fix it? I do it for a living. So,
In 30 plus years, you've probably seen a couple of changes. How has technology transformed the way companies handle payroll today
the
compared to your early
technology
days?
is changed incredibly. I remember people paying in cash. Okay. Now, most of our work is direct deposit, electronic or debit cards. The payroll reporting has gotten more complex, but is much easier because most of it's electronic. Computers are a great thing and do wonderful work. It allows us to do more payrolls in less time. We're able to do more work for our clients with less employees than we used to. We don't, most of the payroll is submitted electronically, it's vetted electronically, it's transmitted electronically. We were the first green payroll back in the 90s where we were paperless. We like to do that. You know, I don't mind saving trees. Uh, we used to have to buy, even though that happened, we used to have to buy paper by the pallet. Now we buy it by the case instead, which is, 40 to 1 reduction. So all that's changed. Um, yeah, technology has changed how everything works and going to electronic, and we're able now to bundle things more effectively and give our clients more services that are bundled in with the payroll that make their life easier, make their employees' life easier, save them money, uh, you know, um, benefits that are pre-tax instead of post-tax, all kinds of things. And we talk to our clients all the time. We're emailing them on a regular basis about all these things and how to make life cheaper and more efficient in terms of payroll. So we like to talk to our clients. We like our clients.
But you've written 4 books, including your recent bestseller, The Payroll
I
Book.
have.
What inspired you to write this particular book, and how does it help small
Well,
businesses and startups?
we obviously get questions all the time. And I looked around, and there's really nothing out there for the small businessman. The only equivalent thing is the payroll source from the APA, and it's $600 and designed to teach payroll processors how to pass the certification exam. It's not a very approachable book. It's very comprehensive, but it's not approachable. So I said, why don't I write something for the small businessman? I've been dealing with them for 30 years. So 2 years later, I had a book. I call it, 30 years of wisdom distilled down to 95,000 words. Wiley and Sons published it, and I've self-published the first 3. Having a real publisher is an immense help and made it a much better book than it would have been otherwise. Uh, it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and so on. Also as electronic on the Kindle. So I wanted to do something that would help the small businessmen. So there's lots of horror stories in there. There's some fun stories, but it walks you through all the things you need to know about payroll taxes, legal aspects, and payroll associated things, uh, aliens, handbooks, workers' comp, PEOs, other things that are associated with payroll. So it's we try to make it as comprehensive as possible. It obviously doesn't answer every question in the world. That would require a bookshelf, but it's a nice little book for the small businessman or the entrepreneur. The subtitle is a guide for small businesses and startups, and that's what it's designed for. If you're a 300-person firm with an HR staff, you might get something out of it, but your staff should be experienced enough not to need it. But if you're an entrepreneur or you've got a 5-person firm, uh, it's a nice book to have. And Paul, for your listeners, if they'd like a copy, if they'll go to thepayrollbook.com, enter the discount code podcast, we'll ship them a copy of the book free of charge as long as supplies last. No shipping, no handling, just a free book for them to peruse and use. And if they find it doesn't answer their questions, my phone number's in the book.
Sounds like a book that's needed, because just the conversations I've had with small business owners, I'm not an accountant. I am not a bookkeeper. That is not my skill set. But when they're saying stuff that I know is wrong, I'm thinking there's a baseline in some of these businesses that it's just, if you weren't taught it, you weren't taught it.
If you think lawyers are bad, check out doctors.
Can you share a story? Obviously not specifics, but was there a small business that you guys helped achieve significant growth or overcome some sort of hurdle that, but for you, could have
Well,
been a disaster. Instead, it was a huge positive.
yeah, we had a client, it was a fairly nice sized one, who had misfiled their 1099s. They had sent in the executive ones and not the uh, staff ones. Uh, I'm sorry, I said 1099s, I meant W 2s. And so they all got there and they sent them in finally, and the IRS had them. So it wasn't like there was any taxes due, but the penalties for that were $100 per W 2. And this was a company that used a lot of temporary labor. So the penalty with the penalties plus interest and penalties on top of the penalties approached $95,000. And this was over the course of 9 years that we took to solve this problem with the IRS. And I talked to the various levels of the IRS because I take a 2848, a limited power of attorney from the Internal Revenue Service, which allows me to advocate for my clients as their power of attorney. And we stepped this up through all the various levels of appeals up to the area manager who wouldn't return my phone calls. And so I knew his boss because I'd been on the advisory council. So I called the deputy chief of appeals in DC and said, Shelley, this gentleman works for you. And she said, yeah. And I said, well, he won't return my phone calls. She said, I'll have him call you this afternoon. So he called and we went through the problem and he agreed to assign it to a different appeals office. And 90 days later, my employer, my client, instead of a $95,000 penalty, had a $400 refund. So, I'm very proud of that one. And their attorney said, if I ever run across one of these again, Charles, I'm giving you a call.
Pretty sure that company would be very difficult to take away from Get Payroll.
We don't lose clients. I mean, clients go out of business, get acquired, but we have a number of clients where we're dealing with the kids who have inherited the business, and we're still dealing with the same client. I mean, it hasn't changed.
Right.
We've been at this for December 17th will be a third of a century, 33 and a third years. So yeah, we've got a lot of clients that have been with us. Some of them have been with us the whole time that we got in the very beginning, because we bend over backwards to take care of our clients. You can talk to the same person over and over. If you're not happy with what you get for an answer from one of my staff people, ask for me. If I'm in the office, I'll talk to you. If not, I'll call you back. We make a point of that. One time I tried to call the president of ADP. That did not go well. When I talked to the receptionist, she said, well, who do you want to talk to? I said, the president. She said, the president of what? And I said, the president of ADP. And she said, hold on. And she came back to me and she said, he doesn't have a phone. And I said, you're telling me that the CEO, the president of a major international company with billions and billions of dollars of business does not have a phone on his desk for him to use? And she said, he probably does, but we can't connect to it. By this time, I'm laughing my ass off, so I just hung up and moved on. But yeah, if any of my clients or any of my potential clients want to talk to me, 972-353-0000, ask for Charles.
I would consider you an expert on the payroll situation as it is today and how it used to be. But what do you think about, I'm thinking in the future, what predictions do you have for the future of payroll services, and how will technology kind of continue to shape the industry?
Well, you have our major competitors advertising AI payroll, which, AI is really expert systems at the moment. So things are happening. We have new systems that are being introduced in our software, which will allow much better analytical reports. It's basically an English language relational database that will be able to access all the payroll information and produce ad hoc reports, which can be very useful. Electronic is going to become more and more. Everything will become electronic. There will be no paper in the end. Everything will be either direct deposit or debit cards, all electronic. Debit cards are basically direct deposit. Just you have a physical card rather than your bank card. It's a different card. That's all. It's a bank account. So timekeeping has gotten more sophisticated. We have geofencing. We have timekeeping off of location. So when your employee comes in with his phone in his pocket, he gets timed in. When he leaves the area around where he's supposed to be, he gets timed out automatically. So things are biometric clocks came in a few years ago. All these things are more and more sophisticated. What you see in science fiction is going to happen for the most part in the next few years. Some of it's going to extend past my lifetime, but it's going to get more sophisticated, more electronic.
Terminator was a documentary.
Well, Terminator, I don't see Skynet happening because my attitude towards Skynet is, well, if the computer AI gets a little too obstreperous, you just go over and pull the plug from the wall. And that pretty well puts an end to it. So
We'll see, but you're thinking in today's technology, and there's things that are going to happen in the future that we probably can't predict.
Absolutely.
I mean, that easy, quick solution not possible.
You're probably right.
All right. Well, you're a seasoned entrepreneur, over 50 years experience. I don't run into a lot of people with 50 years experience in anything. What's the single most valuable piece of advice you would give to an aspiring business owner?
I have two pieces I like to use. The first is one I stole from Bill Gates. People will overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and underestimate what they can accomplish in a decade. It's a marathon, people. The second one is customer service related, and this is so true. There is never a traffic jam on the extra mile. If you will go the extra mile for your clients and your employees, you will be almost unique because your competition won't.
Let's say someone's watching this and they want to become a customer or client, or they have a question or anything. What's the best way for them to get
payroll on the web? There'll be get a quote. There'll be phone numbers. There'll be email addresses. Would love to hear from them. Pete's my business development manager. Hey, I'd love to give you a quote on your payroll and related services. And we're looking for clients all the time. We like our clients. We like to do business with business. So give us a call.
Well, Mr. Reed, I appreciate it. It's been great to get to know you and learn a little bit about your business. And I appreciate you coming on the Inappropriate Growth podcast. And I want to remind all our listeners or watchers, we're also on YouTube. If you want to grow, sometimes you got to be a little inappropriate. Thanks again.